When was the last time you heard someone say they had to swallow a few camels? Or that someone was born behind a brown cheese? If you grew up in Norway or had Norwegian grandparents, you probably heard sayings like these all the time. But today, they're slowly disappearing, fading away with each generation. This video is about 15 Norwegian sayings that your bestie definitely used, but that younger Norwegians might not even recognize. Some are funny, some are surprisingly wise, and all of them deserve to be remembered before they're gone forever. Let's start with number 15. Number 15. Cast armen I svingen. This literally means to throw an arm in the curve. And if you're confused, don't worry. Most young Norwegians today would have no idea what this means either. But back in the 1960s and 70s, when speed skating was one of the biggest sports in Norway, everyone knew exactly what this phrase meant. When a skater needed extra speed, they would swing their arms vigorously back and forth. Normally, skaters kept their arms resting on their backs to save energy. But when it was time to push harder, when victory was within reach, they would throw their arms into it, especially on the curves. So when someone told you to cast armen I svingen, they were telling you to put in that extra effort, to push harder when it matters most. It's a beautiful expression. But with speed skating no longer dominating Norwegian sports culture, this phrase is slowly skating away into history. Number 14. Fy, or sometimes Fida. This was your grandmother's way of expressing disgust. Something gross? Fy. Something offensive? Fy. The lutefisk didn't turn out right. Definitively Fy. The word fy is actually ancient. Its origins come from the sound of spitting. Literally the sound you make when you want to show contempt. Tui. Norwegian Americans whose grandparents emigrated in the late 1800s still remember this expression. They spell it phonetically as Fida because that's how Bessemer pronounced it. But in modern Norway, you're more likely to hear esh or ugh. The old disgust has been replaced by newer, less colorful expressions. Number 13. God dag mann, økseskaft. This translates to good day man, axe handle. And yes, it sounds completely absurd. That's because it comes from an old Norwegian folktale about a deaf man. In the story, a man who couldn't hear well tried to anticipate what people would ask him. He prepared answers in advance. When someone came to visit and asked how he was doing, he answered with what he thought was an appropriate response. But he got everything wrong, including answering good day man, axe handle to a completely unrelated question. Norwegians use this expression for generations to describe someone who answers without actually listening, who gives responses that have nothing to do with the question. Your grandparents probably used it, but ask a Norwegian teenager today, and they'll just stare at you. If you're enjoying these forgotten expressions, why not hit that subscribe button? There's plenty more Norwegian nostalgia coming your way. Number 12. Du store alpaka. You big alpaca. This exclamation of surprise comes from the beloved Stampa books, the Norwegian translation of the British Jennings series. In the original English, the character said Soar Wumf, but the Norwegian translator came up with something far more memorable. Du store alpaca became the go-to expression for surprise and amazement throughout the 1960s and 70s. Why an alpaca and not a llama? Nobody really knows. But if you heard your parents or grandparents suddenly exclaim about a large South American camelid, they weren't having a stroke. They were just genuinely surprised about something. Number 11. Å svelge noen kameler. Speaking of camelids, this expression means to swallow some camels. It has nothing to do with Middle Eastern transportation or exotic cuisine. Instead, it describes having to accept things that go against your principles, to compromise on your values to keep the peace or achieve a goal. Politicians were often described this way. They had to swallow a few camels to keep the majority in parliament. It's a wonderfully visual expression. You can almost picture someone reluctantly gulping down a whole camel, hump and all, just to get along. Older Norwegians still use it occasionally, but the camels are becoming harder to find in everyday conversation. Number 10. Å være født bak en brunost. To be born behind a brown cheese. If someone called you this, it wasn't a compliment. It meant you were a bit stupid, slow, not the brightest candle on the Christmas tree. Why brown cheese? Brunost is that distinctively Norwegian caramelized whey cheese that foreigners either love or find deeply confusing. Being born behind one suggests you missed out on something important, like common sense, or perhaps oxygen. The expression carries a particularly Norwegian flavor of gentle insult, not harsh, just a resigned observation that someone isn't quite keeping up. Number 9. Hvor lenge var Adam i paradis? How long was Adam in paradise? This was how older Norwegians commented on something that didn't last very long, a relationship that ended quickly, a job someone quit after a week, a cake that disappeared before dinner. But it gets better. In northern Norway, they had their own version. Hvor lenge var Adam i Eva? How long was Adam and Eve? Same meaning, just, well, a bit more direct. Both versions are rarely heard today. Modern Norwegians have found less biblical ways to note brief duration. Drop a comment below and tell us which of these expressions your grandparents used. We'd love to hear your memories. Number 8. Det hänger ikke på greip. It doesn't hang on a pitchfork. This farming expression meant that something doesn't make sense, doesn't add up, doesn't hang together logically. Picture a farmer trying to hang something on a pitchfork that simply won't stay. That's what a bad argument or a logical statement was like. It just won't hang. With fewer Norwegians working in agriculture, the image of the pitchfork has lost its power. The expression survives in some dialects, but it's becoming a relic of rural Norway. Number 7. Å snakke rett fra leveren. To speak directly from the liver, not the heart. The liver. Ancient Norwegians and Scandinavians believed the liver was the seat of emotions and truth. So when someone spoke from the liver, they were being completely honest. No sugarcoating, no diplomacy, just raw, unfiltered truth. It's similar to the English speaking from the heart, but somehow more visceral, more Norwegian. You still hear occasionally, but younger generations are more likely to say they're being real or keeping it 100. The liver has been demoted. Number 6. Säljer som hackar koko. Sold like chopped manure. If something was selling incredibly well, flying off the shelves, Norwegians said it was selling like chopped manure. This goes back to farming days when bird guano was processed into valuable fertilizer. The feces came in hard chunks and had to be chopped up to be usable. And it sold extremely well because it made crops grow like crazy. The chopped stuff was premium product, high demand. So when something sold like hakamak, it was a compliment. Good luck explaining that to modern Norwegians who've never seen anyone chop manure. Number 5. Kärringar mot strömmen. The old woman against the current. This expression comes from a famous folktale about a woman so stubborn that even after death, she continued to defy everyone and everything. When her body was thrown into the river, it floated upstream, against the current, against all logic, against nature itself. Norwegians use this phrase for generations to describe people who stubbornly went against the grain, who refused to follow the crowd. Sometimes it was an insult. Sometimes it was a compliment for brave nonconformity. Today, the Kjerringa has mostly stopped swimming. Share this video with your Norwegian family members. See if they remember these sayings. Their reactions might surprise you. Number 4. Å ha lua i hånda. To have your wool hat in your hand. When a Norwegian stood with their lua in hand, they were being humble, deferential, perhaps even a little submissive. Picture a farmer removing his wool cap before speaking to the landowner. That's the image. Someone who has been humbled by circumstances, who acknowledges they're not in a position of power. It's a gesture of respect that's largely disappeared from modern egalitarian Norway. And with it, the expression has faded too. Number 3. Å gå over bekkenettervann. To cross the stream, to fetch water. This beautiful saying describes doing something the complicated way when there's a simple solution right in front of you. Why would you cross a stream to get water when you're already standing next to water? It makes no sense. Neither does overcomplicating simple tasks. Older Norwegians loved pointing out when someone was crossing unnecessary streams. But the metaphor is becoming as hard to find as actual streams in urban Norway. Number 2. Det blir som hackamuk. Related to our earlier manure expression, this one means it turns out like chopped manure. But in this case, it's not a compliment. It means something has become a complete mess, a disaster. Everything fell apart. The project became hakamak. The party turned into hakamak. Your attempt at cooking lutefisk ended up as hakamak. It's versatile in its negativity and slowly being forgotten. And number one, the expression that your bestie definitely use, but your grandchildren probably won't. SMR poufles, butter on bacon. This describes something unnecessarily excessive, redundant, like putting butter on something that's already fatty. Why would you add butter to bacon? Both are already rich with fat. It's overkill. Norwegians use this for situations where someone was adding extras that weren't needed. Compliments when someone was already bragging. Money to someone who was already wealthy. Help that wasn't actually helpful. It's such a perfectly Norwegian expression. Practical, food-related, slightly judgmental, and increasingly rare. These 15 sayings represent more than just old words. They're windows into how Norwegians once thought, how they farmed, what they believed, how they judged each other, how they made sense of the world. Languages change. That's natural. But something is lost when these expressions disappear. A certain color, a certain humor, a connection to the people who came before us. If you want to keep these sayings alive, the best thing you can do is use them. Confuse your friends. Puzzle your coworkers. And when they look at you strangely, you'll have the perfect opportunity to explain a little piece of Norwegian heritage. If this video brought back memories of your grandparents, give it a like. Subscribe to Norway Nostalgia for more videos about the Norway that was, and the traditions worth remembering. And tell us in the comments, which of these expressions do you remember? Which ones did we miss? Vi ses.